Oh, man.
Hey, Old Man on the Mat crew. This is Tony Jones coming at you with another great episode of Old Man on the Mat. Guys, yes, I'm going to say it as I always say it. I am fired up. I'm excited. Today's another great day. Every day you take a good breath or a decent breath or any breath is a good day, right? So, guys, I'm fired up today with the guests we have today. And like I always say in the beginning, guys, I really appreciate all the support you guys have given us on this platform and what we're trying to do here with our podcast. And hopefully we're bringing a lot of people together. And that's our whole purpose. This is just to bring you some people out there who you can benefit from and help your life. And at my age, as I tell everyone, I'm still 39. At my age, I need all the help I can get. So I think if these people can benefit me, they can benefit you guys. So I appreciate you more than you know. But with that, guys, I am excited about our guest that's coming on today. I saw her out there doing some stuff, and I was very confused. Like, how does that fix anything? But with my mind, I want to help. I want everything to help me because the Bible says 120 years. I want this body to make it all the way. I'm only halfway there, right? So, guys, with that, I want to give you the lady herself. She's a neuroperformance coach out there in California. Her name is Yuka Sugira. How are you doing, girl?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I am good. I hope I didn't butcher your last name.
No, you got it perfectly. Exactly right. Excellent.
Good.
Yeah.
So what do you do out there? I mean, like, you're in what part of California are you in?
I'm in Northern California. I'm in the Santa Cruz Mountains, actually. So I'm like in the middle of the trees on top of the mountain. So,
nice.
But it's not too far. Yeah. So it's basically between Silicon Valley and Santa Cruz. So it's a great spot.
Okay. Now, do you do a lot of hit a lot of wineries out there and all that kind of stuff? Is that the area for it?
We used to a little bit. My husband and I live out here. I don't drink alcohol. I can't. I'm basically allergic to it. Yeah.
Oh wow.
I don't like the way it tastes, and B, I have allergic reactions.
Oh, that's not good at all.
So there are many wineries like within like 5-10 minutes of us. My husband drinks wine, but I don't. So anyway, so we haven't been hitting them lately. So
man, that's the perfect area too, with all the vineyards and all that.
But I save a lot of money.
Well, yeah, right. As I'm saying this, I'm looking over at my bar over there, and I need to get allergic to this stuff, you know?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, let's get started. Let's jump in there. So what is neuroperformance? What is that?
Yes. It's basically taking applied neuroscience, which is the study of neurology, neurophysiology, like how does the brain work and how does it interact with the body? So it's taking all the stuff that we know from research and study and applying it to performance. So whether it's sports performance, recovery, pain management, pain alleviation, because we know that the brain's in charge of everything. Right. So it's in charge of obviously like thinking, feeling, emotions, memory, things that we traditionally think about the brain, but it is also in charge of our movement. It's in charge of muscle tone. It's in charge of coordination, balance, pain even actually is something that it's an event in the brain. So given all of these things, thanks to, so my training was in applied neuroscience specifically for, so it wasn't a university degree, but it was specifically for people in the movement or rehabilitation professions. How can we take all of this and then actually make it really applicable and pretty simple actually to help people change their own bodies, right? And so to help give me tools to help other people change their bodies. And it's super fun because as you were saying, you're like, you saw something, you're like, what is happening?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And so a lot of times, like, because people have preconceptions about like, well, how do I get stronger? How do I get more flexible?
Yes.
How can I have better balance? That we have sort of preconceived ideas of how that happens. And particularly the older we get, we have like, based on my history and what everybody's told me through my life, this is how it works.
Yeah.
Right. But then when you see something where like I can do an eye exercise and now I can touch my toes when I couldn't 30 seconds before, then it's like, wait a minute.
Yeah, because I saw a video of you doing, it was, you had this young lady, she was standing there and she was turning her head to the side and she was getting more flexible in her leg.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And so what it does, so it's basically, so just kind of one of the simple models to think about how it works is that you can think of a loop, right? So we have in one part of the loop all of the inputs that come into the brain, right, into our senses. So it's our vision, hearing, sense of touch, smell, all of these things, right? And then that includes vision is a really, really big one. Another big input is our proprioceptive system. So what is the information that's coming in from our joints, from our skin? And then another big one that drill is actually training was the vestibular system. And so that is your balance system, canals and stones that are deep in your inner ear that regulate balance. Okay. And so if you think of the main ones being vision, vestibular, and then proprioception, particularly as in regard to movement, think of those as satellites. Okay. And so we want those satellites to be getting really good signals, really clear signals, really accurate signals. Right. So those signals are coming into our nervous system, right? The brain is processing it, making sense of what is this? Have I seen it before? Am I safe? What do I need to do? So there's this, kind of like a little computer, the brain is acting, processing, predicting, and then it makes a decision. And then that decision is our movement. So that could be reflexive, like I actually just poured hot water on my hand accidentally a little while ago, right? The
wow, not good. Not good.
It was fine. I didn't get burned or anything. But so my reflexive was to quickly pull my hand away. Right. So I'm not just making up. I actually did do this. It's a great example, but I didn't actually. Right. So the input, the satellite is my skin. Okay. Right. There's receptors on my skin, and they sense immediately. Okay, this is really hot. That signal goes up into my brain very, very quickly. My brain is processing, or maybe even actually just to my spinal cord. Like, this is dangerous. You need to do something. Don't keep your hand there. Right. And then the decision is move your hand away, and then the brain creates the command to move my hand. Okay. So that's a reflexive version. And then a voluntary thing would be, okay, so if I actually do a drill that clarifies the signals or helps the signals, or even just kind of turns on more switches on that satellite for my vestibular system, for example. Our vestibular system is super important. It's like all about balance, reflexive stability. If I turn those on more than on purpose, right, then I could potentially improve my balance. Okay. Right? So the decision making is a little bit less conscious in some ways, right? So it's like I'm giving stimulation, the satellite is feeding in information to my brain. My brain then is sending signals down my brainstem, my spinal cord, and then from my spinal cord to my muscles, and then something changes. So I can get into more examples, but that's, in essence, there's a loop that happens from the satellites coming in, the brain is triangulating the signal, and then giving a clear signal out. Okay.
So you have me there, and I understand that. I mean, for the most part, you explained that extremely well, and it's very. I like the way you just explained it, because you put it on a third grade level, and I think that's the way a lot of you smart people need to do for us.
I work with a lot of kids, and so sometimes you do need to actually explain it to a 10-year-old. So.
Yes, and that was very helpful. Now, how does that correlate with making the muscle more flexible?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the other thing that the brain is in charge of, which when I first learned this, I was like, wait, what? The brain is in charge of regulating muscle tone. So balancing the tone between flexors and extensors, right? So flexors is your bicep, extensors is tricep, flexors, hip flexors, extensors are like glutes, hamstrings. Right. And so there are parts of the brain, there are very specific parts of the brain that help set the tone as well as function of those muscles. So one of those is the vestibular system. So if you just imagine, so the deep inside the inner ear, we have these teeny tiny little canals. So they look like little roller coasters, like little loops. Okay. They're filled with fluid. And then they also have these teeny tiny little hairs. So if I turn my head or if I bend over, you can imagine that the fluid in those tubes starts to move.
Okay, I see
right?
it. Yep.
The same way, right? If you had water in a hula hoop, right, it's gonna start spinning. And then the hairs that are in the canals or kind of near the canals, they're going to move as a result of the movement of the fluid.
Okay.
Right. So they're like tiny little, like the way that like seaweed moves in the water.
Right.
So those little hairs now send signals to the brainstem. Actually, sorry. Yeah. They send signals to the brainstem. The brainstem is kind of processing it, taking in what's happening. That brainstem is now going to send signals down the back. Okay. So the example is if I bend over to pick up something off of the ground, right? What is keeping me from landing on my face?
Your muscles and your
skeleton. The muscles down the back, right?
Yeah.
And that is because as I bend over, the fluid's moving. The brain is like, oh, she's bending forward. I better turn on at an appropriate level the muscles down her back so she doesn't land on her face and hurt the brain.
Gotcha.
Right?
Yeah.
Or my face.
Okay.
Equally bad.
Right? Exactly.
So basically so the role of this system is to instantaneously, reflexively set the tone of mostly the posterior chain, although obviously it's going to have effects on the front of the body, but primarily affects the posterior chain to basically keep us upright.
Okay.
So there's this pathway from the inner ear, down the spine, down the posterior chain. And this is from the neck all the way to the soles of the feet.
Gotcha.
So that's what there's a specific pathway. It's called the vestibulospinal pathway, which makes sense. It's from the vestibular system to the spinal cord that activates muscles down the back. So we have this pathway.
Right.
And so when we activate it, it is going to change or reset the tone of the muscles. Even when we're not falling, like we may be turning our head, right? So quickly turn your head. The fluid in the canals are moving, and then this signal is getting triggered.
Gotcha. Yep.
And so for most people, doing it usually doesn't take too much activation. Like it can be as little as 30 seconds, and then you can feel a change in your hamstrings or your back.
Really? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Wow. It's super fun.
Wow. I'm sitting here I'm standing right now, turning my head. And see if we can feel that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the big roles of the vestibular. So it's to help us maintain our balance. It's to help us see clearly while we're moving.
Okay.
So, and you do martial arts, right?
Right. Correct.
Okay. So so it's critical. And so it's important telling us which way is up.
Yep.
Right. So as I'm getting thrown, which God forbid I never want to do.
They say it's fun, and after all the years of doing it, it's not fun.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, gymnastics is like also brutal on the body, but I don't know. I don't know that I want to volunteer to get
thrown in the air. They say it's fun, and they still haven't gotten fun yet all these years.
No. But so what the vestibular, it helps us understand which way is up.
Okay.
Right. So short of like landing back on the mat, it helps me orient myself to gravity. So that's one of the big roles it has. For activities where I'm moving, it's helping keep things that I need to see clearly remain clear. So if I'm running, like in gymnastics, right? So I'm running towards the vault table, right? The thing that's keeping the vault table from like looking like it's on a shaky camera is the vestibular system in coordination with the eyes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I see.
So there's like if I'm a baseball player and I'm running, following a ball as I'm trying to catch it, the thing that's helping keep it clear is the vestibular system with the visual system.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense now. Okay. Got it.
Yeah. So it's super, super important. It helps with obviously helps with balance. It helps with posture, stability, all these things. So it's a super critical system that most people have never even heard of, but then also if you even heard of it, you're like, well, how do I apply this to performance? Like, can we assess it? Can we train it to get a better result? And the answer is yes.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So do you see like is it a quick? I'm not looking for a quick. I want a quick solution to everything. No, but I mean what I mean is that do you see like the results pretty fast once you start doing these to be more flexible? Do you start seeing that pretty quick, or is it a long process?
You can. Yeah. So it takes, so you might get a result in 30 seconds, right? Just for the moment. That result may last for a couple of minutes. It may last for a couple of hours. And that depends on basically what are you going to do right after that. And then as well as what is the condition of your nervous system and your body. Right. So like, have you had multiple concussions? Right. Maybe, and your vestibular system gets banged around often, even though it's well protected. That is one of the parts of the brain that often gets a little damaged. Right. So depending on your history, depending on your body, depending on your age, right. It's like a 12-year-old is going to respond differently than a 52-year-old.
Right.
Unfortunately, it's not fair, but that's just how it is.
I keep acting like I'm 12, but it ain't working.
I know, right? So in order to have lasting change, just think of it like anything else that you're trying to change or learn. Right. So a skill requires practice and repetition and focus. Getting stronger, same thing, learning a new language. And so it does take, in order for something to last, for you to create the new connections between the neurons, like neuroplasticity, right? In order to create more of that and then make sure that those connections are strong and they stick, it takes repetition. So for me, for example, I broke my wrist a few years ago, and as a result of that, I could no longer really get my hand like between my shoulder blades or like near there.
Right. Okay.
And so I was like, this is annoying because I can do it on one side. I want to be able to do it on the other side. And so for me, the amount of time it took, so I probably did, I'm 54. So I did probably 3 to 5 minutes of drills almost every day. So not a lot.
Yeah, that's not a lot.
And so within, I would say about a month, like it was back to where it used to be.
Oh, wow. That is fast. That is pretty fast.
Yeah. So it can take it as long as it's regular, right? And you're actually doing drills that assess well. So like what I did is like, okay, I know all the things that could potentially change the range of motion on my shoulder. I'm going to try all of them. And what I do is I test my range of motion first.
Okay.
Then I'm going to do the drill for 30 seconds or whatever. And then I reassess that exact same range of motion.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to pick out the drills that gave me the best effect.
Gotcha.
And then I'm like, okay, so these 5 drills, like these seem to be really good. So I'm going to just do these 5.
Okay. So each person, of course, is different. So you don't have with your system, here's a number 1, 2, 3, everybody does it. And then you're all better. Nothing like that. So it's all personal.
Yeah. And for the most part, there are drills that tend to do well for most people. But sometimes it's like, well, actually, you need to do this while you're also walking backwards. Or, or while you're balancing on one leg and your eyes are closed.
Oh my gosh.
or maybe you need to sit down and do the drill, right? Depending on the level of activation that your nervous system is going to respond to.
Okay. And you say you work primarily with young children, or do you work the whole spectrum with older people? The whole
spectrum.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I've kind of niched down on social media just for gymnastics, but I work with everybody. Yeah. And usually people will rematch. I'm like, well, so I'm like 55 and I do yoga and I'm like, yeah, it's fine. I'll work with everybody.
Yeah, because it seems like that'd be helpful for our age group. I mean, really big time.
Absolutely. Yes.
So all the stuff I'm seeing you do over the LevelUp Neuroperformance, you do orthopedic massage also, along with Pilates and everything like that?
Yeah, so that's how I started. I actually was in the software industry for 18 years. So that's what actually took me out here.
It's a huge turn.
Yeah, it is a little bit. Yeah, it's like I'm debugging the body instead. I wasn't actually an engineer. I was trained. I didn't actually code. I just like organized people, basically.
No, that's still hard. You're dealing with people.
Yes.
Still hard.
Well, I'm still dealing with people.
Right.
No, it is. It's much harder because I'm dealing with lots of people that don't necessarily want to do what I'm asking them to do. So it's quite different versus like people that come to me now are like, please help me. So
now it's easier.
Yeah. So what was I saying? Oh yeah. So I did
orthopedic massage.
So at about the same time I started coaching gymnastics, just kind of as a side job. in the evenings. And then at the same time started training in orthopedic massage and orthopedic Pilates. Cause I had actually had arthroscopic surgery on my hip.
Oh, wow.
Decided not to go through PT, and instead found somebody that did this orthopedic massage and Pilates. And then so she basically recruited me to work for her.
Okay, that makes
and
sense.
that was a transition. Yeah. And so that's where I started. And was finding, it was really fascinating and interesting. And then I got into the applied neuroscience because I was like, well, there's always, and this is probably common among people that work with bodies and movement and rehab and things like that. Like, there's always somebody that you're like, this is just not working for you. Like, this system and the tools that I have, they're great and they work for most things, but I can't figure out how to help you with whatever it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so you always you're just looking for other things to help you, or if it's performance, right, you're looking for things that kind of just can help you with this specific issue that you have or that a student has.
Right.
And so that's how I landed into the neuroperformance world or the neuro world. And now I incorporate a little bit of both. So depending on if I'm obviously if I work with a lot of virtual clients, I'm not going to do massage, or, we do some movement. But like I take what I've learned from those things and then basically do an integration of the pure neuro drills, but then can we somehow kind of manipulate that or include that in, if I'm in person, into like an in-person session or a hands-on session.
Makes sense. And the stuff you do, I think is fascinating because I look at medicine now. I have friends who are in the medical field, doctors, some nurses, and it's mostly, and I'm not going to bash on medicine because I think it's great. I think it helps everybody, However, I see that people are taking other avenues outside of the traditional medicine and cutting and everything else, surgery. They're taking different, like chiropractor, they're big now. And to listen to what you're doing, I think a lot of that, can keep us all together healthy. So you sound, in my mind, you're attractive because you sound like a chiropractor to me, because that's attractive to me. I mean, because you're doing something outside the box to help me get better,
Yeah.
So, have you found that a lot of people are rejecting this, or I won't say rejecting, or coming towards you more, or just like, this is who this doesn't work,
If it depends on kind of the bias, I think it's less and less. So, because I think neuroscience and the brain are more in vogue and much more in kind of the popular conversation. Right. Than they were, let's say, when did I start doing this? It was about 7 years ago, where people weren't talking about the brain as much, right? It wasn't quite as big. I mean, it's kind of hard to remember but for example, I remember, and this was like a reasonably common response, is I remember talking to, she was a PT and a chiropractor, like together.
Mm.
And the name of the company that I got the training through, if anyone's interested, is called Z Health. It's a fantastic system and educational courses. And I mentioned I'm doing applied neuroscience through Z Health, and they kind of like, oh, like you're one of those, kind of poo-pooing it a little bit. And so that didn't feel great. I was like, whatever, you just don't understand.
Exactly.
But now, and I think a little bit depends on the age and sort of how much you have invested in your way of doing things. Right. Right. But now it seems much more the response is changing. Where there's more interest from physical therapists, from medical providers, osteopaths, whatever, in what's possible, because it can also be really powerful to do in conjunction with physical therapy.
Oh, absolutely.
So did I answer your question?
Yeah, you did. Yes, you did. Okay. I get it. But like I was saying, I'm fascinated by this because as I get older, a lot more things make sense to me. Because we try to fix our bodies one way for all the years. Then we end up at this point. The only way they say I went to see a doctor and my back was really bothering me for all the years on, getting thrown in the air, in judo and all that stuff. And his reaction was, well, you need to stop doing that now. And I'm thinking, If I just sit around, I'm going to get fatter.
Right. It's
My
even
back's
worse.
going to get better. Yeah, it's going to get worse. So I had to look for other avenues. So I look at all these things and I try to apply it to my life. And I think what you're doing, I think it's going to be huge, especially in the martial arts industry, because trust me, there's a lot of old dogs out there like me are just constantly hurting, but don't want to step off the mat. Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah. And so like I said, so I'm 54. And so I notice, and I'm mobile just because genetically, like I just always have been. So that's not necessarily an issue, but like, you know, like joints don't feel as good as they do, you know, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. So there are things like if I'm organized and I get myself to, you know, whatever class I might be taking, if I do, I spend maybe, so like it's not just the visual stuff, like there's like really specific joint mobilization exercises that help open up the joints and move them in ways that maybe you don't traditionally move them. And so I will do ideally like 10 minutes of, maybe not even 10, maybe just a little less than 10 of joint mobilization. It's all active. And then a bunch of vision and vestibular, and then maybe some neuromechanics, like you've kind of maybe heard of them as nerve glides. And that gets me feeling better than if I just walk into the class and start going. And I'm like, I'm looking around at the class, I'm like, all these people are like my age, a little bit younger, a little bit older. And then they just start jumping right away. I'm like,
you're like, wait, slow down.
Like, no wonder your knees don't feel good. Like maybe, so there's the like the concept of physical prep. Before, as opposed to just warm up.
Okay. Gotcha.
Right. So it's kind of, it's taking advantage again of like, I'm doing things that I know for me feel good. And that I know are activating like maybe my glutes a little bit better or my hamstrings a little bit better. Things like that. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, it can be,
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. What did you say?
No, it can be great. I think if, we can test some things with you at some point, but like, especially. So like what in so for the older martial artists, like what are common complaints?
You know what?
Or even younger, whatever. I don't know.
I'm going to show the old guys, because the young guys I grew up with, I don't care. Y'all try to kill me. I don't care about y'all, you know. No, anyway, most of the guys in my age group, and, you know, I never tell my age, but, you know, we're close. Anyway, you know, we're close in age. But most of these guys, we have back issues. Our knees are literally, I mean, feel like they want to explode most of the time. And that's the common conversation with me and some of the guys in my own age that we're still on the mat training. You know, we have shoulder issues, and those are big ones. You know, the hands and things like that, I guess, because we use them all day. But the main three would be the back, the knees, and the shoulders. And I see that that's a gambit across the board for all the, and I say older, anybody who's been in martial arts for a while. You know, you're going to feel those things.
Yeah, because there's so much compression and sort of torquing, right, on the joints.
It's always like, and I use this example, like if I'm like grappling in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I have a guy my size, 200 pounds on top of me. I'm pressing, and he's pressing against it. So my shoulders are trying to activate, and they're forcing it back the other way. I don't know if that makes sense, a movement or whatever.
Yeah. That sounds terrible.
It is. But it's just a room full of guys with egos. Well, good egos, not the negative out there.
So one approach, and so again, if I'm thinking about my musculoskeletal system as a satellite, right, I want to have 4K, 5K degree of clarity. Accuracy and completeness of the information that satellite is collecting and sending. And so one thing you might, this may be completely wrong, so tell me if it is. But a position, like an awkward position that you might commonly get into, or an end range position that you might commonly get into where you also need to have force. Okay, so gotcha. I don't know. Well, so you have something in mind?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like the position I was just telling you, where the guy's on top of you, and that's like very common, very common.
Okay. So what you would do there, so there are a couple of things you could do. So obviously not with like the full weight of somebody on you, but while you're there, can you now make a nice smooth circle with your scapula in that position?
With someone not on me? No. But
with somebody not on you, right? You would just start with your arm in that position. Right? Oh, yeah. And obviously, like if you're on your back, it's a little bit harder to actually move your scapula around.
So if I'm on my side, per se, and I'm doing that motion, that big circular motion, you mean? Yeah, I could do that. It's still painful, but, you know, I can still do it like I'm doing it right now. Ow.
Okay. So you want to do it hopefully without pain.
Yeah,
But so just as an example, right, control of your joint so control of like the scapula on the thorax, right? Can you do nice smooth circles? Is helping clarify the joint. And sometimes pain and restriction comes from the fact that the brain is like, okay, I need to protect this joint.
Right.
And so one way that I can protect it is to make it not move.
Okay.
Right?
Gotcha.
Right.
Yeah.
And with back pain, a lot of times when you have that like moment where, or if you've had pain for a while and your back gets tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter, the nervous system is it is, because your spinal muscles, on top of like being important, doing the job that they do, they're also playing a little bit of a role in protecting your organs.
Okay.
And so if the brain's like, the nervous system understands that there's instability or there's been pain, and it's like, okay, so clearly this is something we need to guard. Right. And so it's going to just make things not move because it doesn't trust, right, control or mobility. And unfortunately, it's a protective response, but it's not helpful.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So then again with the shoulder, so the other thing you might try is with somebody. So if you think like the directions of a compass, so this requires a partner. Okay. So you're going to have them apply force in 4, right, the cardinal directions, like left, right, up, down, right? And you're applying isometric force back to them. Okay. Right. You could even do more. And then they can actually try to twist your arm. You twist in the opposite way. Okay. And then vice versa. They twist the opposite way. You try to twist into it. Okay. And so again, if you think about it, you're just clearing up your brain's map of this joint. So like, oh, I know how, and you may find that one direction, they're just like, I don't know how to do this. Or maybe they don't actually know how to rotate it. And so when there's a lack of clarity in a movement, again, the brain's like, it's kind of like the analogy I use is like you're driving around with windshield wipers that need to be replaced. Okay. Like you can do it. Yeah, that's like blurry and you can do it and you can see where you're going, but you're going to be much more protective and maybe slower and less confident in your driving than if you had brand new, like super clear windshield. Right. Gotcha. And so So
doing this process, doing all this, is it just you're trying to, not just, but you're trying to reprogram your brain in essence to, okay, don't stop that motion. Let me do this a little bit so I can get it better. Yes. Yeah. You're basically taking the brakes off, right? Do you know a car analogy? Yeah. Right. So what is it? What is the nervous system trying to protect you from? And that could be something as simple as like, oh, I don't know how to move my arm in all the ways that it can move, right? That is good enough. Or maybe my visual system is a little bit compromised. Like my eyes don't do exactly what they should do together at the same time, equally and accurately. Okay. So that can be another source of threat. And particularly because the visual system is really our dominant sense. Okay. We take in more information and there's more brain space dedicated to processing what we see than any other function that we have. Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. The vision is the king. And so if I have issues with my vision, so for example, like if something actually, I worked with I think he was a MMA fighter, and it's the only martial, like real fighter that I've ever worked with. But we did this thing called the pencil push-up. Okay. Where you basically are holding something that you focus on. It can be your thumbnail out at arm's length, and then you bring it in to your eyes, like right in between the bridge of your nose, and then you push it back out. Okay. And for him, this was like, we were doing it because he had back pain at the time. And so we were mostly doing that. But this is one of the things that I assessed with him and he had a good result from it. And he's like, he came back to me a couple of weeks later. He's like, yeah, that one's really helpful because I realized like it helps me keep my eyes open. What's coming at me? Okay. Yeah. Right. Like, yeah. You need that. You need that. Yeah. And so for example, for sports where like the combat is much closer, like you're much more face to face, like that is something that I would look at, like how comfortable is this person with something coming right next to their face that they have to maintain focus on. Right.
Right? Like,
Most
are
time you
your eyes
flinch or
moving?
something.
Yeah. Do you
Yeah.
flinch? Do
Yeah.
your eyes get really tired all of a sudden? Are you blinking a lot? Are you kind of squinting as this happens? And
Yeah.
then so those are all signs to me of a little bit of startle or a little bit of threat, or like I don't like something coming at my face even when it's my own hand.
Right. That makes sense
Right?
though. That
Or
does.
even if it's something very controlled. And so I was like, okay, like if you're doing, and this is most sports, right?
Yes.
Whether it's
Yes.
a like football, gymnastics, baseball, basketball, right?
Yeah.
Jujitsu, all this stuff, something is coming at
It always. Yeah.
always, right? And so it's a skill,
Yeah.
right, to be able to stay focused. And we also want to assess it to see, like, is this something that's potentially creating some source of threat to you? And
Yeah.
when we feel threat, we can have like a big response or even a micro response of
Okay.
tension.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. But so, that's fascinating. You said you work with the MMA guy doing that. And
Yeah.
that's huge because, like you said, they're getting punched and everything else. And that does train guys not to flinch or not to close their eyes or,
Yes.
because
Yeah.
they have to stay in front. And, a funny thing, a funny story. I'm not gonna say the person's name because I
Okay.
don't want to call him out. But this was a few years back, and we're at a party and we're talking martial arts, and he says, "You know what? I don't know how we got on the conversation, but he said, you know what got my fight game a whole lot better." And I was like, "Wow, what did you do?" I'm in my head, I'm thinking some exercise or whatever. He says,
Uh-huh.
"I learned to keep my eyes open when I'm fighting." I said, "What?" Oh my gosh! I was like, "Well, that would help me too, I guess, if I'm closing my eyes fighting." You don't want to do that.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
tickles me
but
every
because
time I think about
it's a
that.
natural instinct, right? We have to override this instinct to close our eyes when something is coming at our face,
That's true. Oh my
right?
gosh.
Because
Oh wow.
or like to, I mean, obviously you protect your face too,
Well,
but
yeah.
yeah, and for gymnasts, actually, it's surprising. Actually, maybe it is like if you watch people or if you're training people, like how many people do actually keep their eyes open.
Yeah.
With the gymnasts that I work with, that can be a pretty common thing. Like you'd think, oh, they have to have their eyes open, but a lot of
Yeah.
them, their eyes are closed when you think that they should be open. Um,
Really? They're
oh
running
yeah.
down that thing. Wow, and they have
Well,
their
when
eyes
they're
closed.
running, their eyes are open, but when they're flipping in the air, a lot of times
Yeah.
you'll see their eyes are like squeezing closed, like a tension response, right?
Okay.
Um, and to me, I'm like, okay, well, that's somehow your brain is like, obviously you're not safe. It's highly dangerous to be
Well, yeah. Oh my
flipping and twisting in the
gosh.
air, but it's a sign to me that when your face is scrunched and your eyes are squeezing tight, that your brain does not like processing the visual information.
Okay.
And it's not that their eyes need to be open the entire time, but you should
Yeah.
have they're not relying on their eyes to help them figure out where they are in space.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
is it now? Just speaking of gymnasts, now, do they keep
Yeah.
their eyes closed because it disorients them and stuff like that,
I
or
think so. I think it's too I mean, it's a little bit too much information to or not too much. It is a lot of information to process, and they're kind
Yeah.
of like you're not really seeing it, like you're seeing like, oh, like it's blue and it's black. I see the ceiling, I see the
Yeah.
floor.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the really ones who are really, really good at air awareness, their eyes are open and they are seeing and processing where they are.
Wow.
But some of them, like because I do this a lot as I look around for pictures, and some of them, their eyes are actually squeezing shut.
Wow.
Because it's just too overwhelming.
Well, yeah, you're taking in everything.
Right, right.
You're talking about retraining the brain. It's a
Yeah.
book by Caroline Leaf. I don't know if you've heard of her.
No, I haven't.
I forget what the title
Is
of
it
that book.
LEIF or LE?
It's yes, I think it's LEIF. You can Google it. Dang it.
Okay.
Let me do that. Caroline Leaf, and there's it's something about the brain. I think it's reprogram your brain or something like this.
Okay.
Was a few years back. I read this book, and she was talking about how the brain, like you're talking about, creating those new pathways, and how the brain it on a cellular level, when you start doing different habits, it actually creates a groove in your brain on a cellular level of that new pathway that it creates.
Yep.
And that's fascinating to me.
Yes, and it is. And actually, so speaking of other books, there's a he wrote, this was probably 10 years now ago. It's his name is Norman Doidge. Like some people may have heard of this, Doidge. And he has two books. One of them I think is like the way the brain changes itself or something like that. But yeah, so this process, it's happening all the time.
Yeah.
So when you're learning something, right? So you think of these two little so the neurons are just these think of them as they have arms that are reaching out with fingers.
Right.
Right. And then there's another arm on the other side that's reaching out with fingers. And the pathway, the connection, the new thing is when those fingers now have the synapse that is the space that's connecting them.
Okay.
Right. So they're now communicating with each other. And the more frequently they communicate with each other, that's what makes that pathway stronger and makes it last. Right. So it's like the difference between a thread and a rope. Right.
Okay.
So the more that you're doing it, the nervous system starts laying down a little accelerating sheath around it that oh, okay, this is important to you. You seem to want to do this a lot and you seem to be paying attention a lot when you do this. So I'm going to actually make this process more efficient by laying down, it's called the myelin sheath that just accelerates the speed of the signals going down that pathway.
Wow.
And so that's how we get better at something.
Yeah, the brain and the body is so fascinating. Oh
yeah.
My gosh. Wow. Well, yeah, the name is Caroline Leaf, Leaf. That's it.
Leaf. Okay.
Yeah, Caroline Leaf, and it's a great book. It talks just like what you're saying about creating those pathways in the mind and the body. It just fascinates me because I think our body, and all the books that I read and all the stuff on that, the body can heal itself if given it the right environment.
Yes,
but we do a lot of things to prevent that.
Yes. Right. And conversely, when we stop doing things, our brain's oh, this is not important to you anymore.
Yeah.
I'm gonna use the energy that we have in the brain to actually kind of those things start kind of getting pruned.
Yeah.
And instead of something else. So that's why language, if we don't practice it, right,
oh yeah,
we lose, right? Or foreign language is not our main language, although
well, yes.
that too, right?
That too for me is our what?
Yeah.
Now, do you speak multiple languages also? Speaking of that, that's pretty cool.
Badly.
Badly. You can communicate, but not very well, right?
Yeah, I can communicate with a 5-year-old basically.
Right, there you go.
Different languages.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
How long have you been here? What's your nationality? Where are you from?
I'm Japanese. So my parents,
awesome.
I was born and raised in Chicago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then
same as here.
Pardon me?
Same here, Southside Chicago.
Oh, you were? Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that's I love Chicago. I haven't been back in a little while, but
you're not missing them.
So I was raised here, and then grew up in Chicago, and then went to East Coast for school, and then came out to the West Coast during the .com boom.
Okay.
So lived through all of that. Yeah.
Lived through it all. Yeah.
It was fun. I really enjoyed the whole thing, but then it just got to a point where I was like, I think I'm ready for something else.
Yeah.
It was a big turn.
Huge turn.
Yeah.
Wow.
But go ahead. No,
go ahead. I like your story. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
I do that
just
a lot.
saying
I'm
that
sorry.
the nervous system, and I had zero interest in science until zero.
Really?
until I started studying the nerve, because I don't know if it's because it's so pertinent to just life in general, the power, but it is also just, it's so, as you're saying, it's such a malleable thing.
Oh yeah.
Right. Neuroplasticity is happening all the time. And because the brain is in charge of everything, right? Yeah. If you know what to do to stimulate the right parts of it, then you can create change.
Yeah.
And sometimes in some ways, stimulating the right parts of the nervous system is done through drugs, right? Through medicine.
Yeah.
Because we don't have answers for everything, but
this is true.
It's
we try to say we do. Now, when it comes to the brain, I ask this because you're a neuroscientist. Am I saying that right?
I wouldn't call myself that. I'm a neuroperformance coach. Yeah, neuroscientist would. Yeah.
Yeah, but I still think, hey, you know about the brain, so I'm like, hey, you're a scientist.
Yeah.
Now they say we don't use but 10% of our brain. Is that true, or is that from what you're studying and finding out with what you're doing?
I have not actually studied that metric in terms of how much do we actually use.
Yeah.
I don't really know how much, but I feel like the more, I guess, because people are like, oh, I got all these extra brain cells to kill. Like, who cares?
Yeah. I don't think we do.
Right? I'm like, well, actually, when you do things that affect your brain cells, those are the ones that actually matter. Like, you can just tell, like, how good is your balance before and after you've had 3 beers?
Good point.
Right?
Yeah, very good point.
So,
yeah.
like, clearly you're directly affecting, it's actually your cerebellum, which is the mini brain. So in terms of the 10%, like, I don't actually know. I haven't really studied it because it's not necessarily pertinent to what I do.
You're doing, right?
But to say, like, it's funny though, because my husband jokes like this. He's like, oh, like, it doesn't matter. I'm only using, like, I got all these extra things that but the example is like, so clearly though, you're affecting a really important part of your brain when you're drinking. So maybe think about that for a second.
Right.
But
as I'm throwing away my boobs. No, I'm just keeping my boobs. No, my boobs.
So it's, so your cerebellum, so the alcohol affects the cerebellum, which is it's a mini brain. It's in the back of the brain. It actually, so in terms of percentages and importance of brain, so the cerebellum is, I want to say 20% of the volume. So like in terms of space that it takes up, roughly 20% of the volume, but somewhere between 70 and 80% of the neurons of the brain are in the cerebellum.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So this is like your Manhattan of the brain, right?
Yeah, it's
super
a big
dense.
Deal. Yeah.
Super, super, super dense, super important. And it's responsible for everything from, so all the DUI, I don't know, we're continue to talk about alcohol, but like the roadside tests that you do where you have to like touch your nose with your fingertip, like I actually do those tests because it's a test of the cerebellum. Right? Walking on a line, balancing, they're all cerebellar tests.
Wow.
And so somebody inevitably asks me, like, so if I do those a lot, if I get pulled over,
I can pass it.
Will I do better on these other tests? Right? I'm like, I don't know. Maybe
you may do great on the test, but all the cars you just hit on the way over.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
But so the cerebellum. So just in terms of like super important parts of the brain that you don't want to mess with, that is one. So
that makes sense. But I was thinking, I was talking to a friend of mine. This was actually yesterday. We're watching a movie, and the guy on the screen, he's talking to himself because he's drunk, but he's talking to himself. He's saying, narrating the scene. Oh, I need to get out of here. I can't stand up again. And I started thinking. I said, this, we've all been young once. Maybe not you because you can't drink because you got sick. But we've all been young and stupid before, and we got drunk. And I said, you know what? You can talk to yourself while you're in that phase. You're drunk, but you're still saying, oh, I need to sober up. I shouldn't do this. I should be calmer. I should sit down. Why is that though? I'm asking you once again, like neuroscience.
I mean,
that's fascinating.
So I'm going to just talk through this. I don't know if I have an answer, but so the part, the part of the brain that is the frontal lobe, which is like the executive. That's the reason, the judgment, problem solving, like good decision making. It's the part of the brain that when we're younger is not as well developed, which is why we get into stupid situations.
Right.
This is why car insurance or like rental cars don't allow you to rent until you're 25.
Exactly.
Because, like that part of the brain finishes developing in the mid-20s.
Okay.
And like, I think that's not a coincidence that's like the age that you're allowed to try.
Everyone does really stupid things at that age.
Yeah. And so, I think it's just, so what's happening is that you're feeling discomfort, right? You're feeling some kind of a threat.
Yes.
Right. Just to your comfort, to your well-being, to your safety. And then there's just a process of like, well, how can I get myself out of this? Hopefully, right, we have that process triggers in. The frontal lobe starts taking over, saying, what do I need to do to change the situation?
Yeah.
So that can become a conscious process. It can be like sort of involuntary, right? Where like, if somebody has had either, whether it's food or whatever it is, they're like, you know what? I just need to lie down.
Yeah.
Right. Because this is going to take me away, or even pain, right? This is going to take me away from a situation that's going to put me in more danger.
Okay.
Yeah. And when when the frontal lobe is not as well developed, like that that flip doesn't come on.
Hey, have another drink. You'll do better.
Right. Yeah. I have a 22-year-old nephew, and like, he's a perfect example of I see the process of like where he's like does fewer and fewer and less frequent stupid things.
Yeah. At 25, he'll be perfectly smart.
Right.
At least I told myself that at that age. And no, I am
Yeah.
not. But that's pretty fascinating, though. Now, let me ask you this. Now, when you, in your system, what you're doing, and you have a new guy, let's say you have an old guy like myself walk in the door and say, I have all these issues. What is your first step with that person? Usually, it's just, a general.
Yeah. So one, I'll take a history.
Okay.
That's even before like you even walk in. But let's say I kind of understand like who you are, what you've done, like what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
I'll have you walk.
Okay.
Because walking as a hopefully like not conscious, like it's basically involuntary to some degree. Like we don't have to think about it, hopefully.
Okay.
And so I'll see how you walk, and because there are certain clues in your gait that can tie back to certain parts of your brain that may be active or inactive, or the left side is not even with the right side.
Okay.
So I look at like arm swing, which way are your palms facing, which way are your feet moving, what is the motion of your SI joint, what's happening with your head.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. And so in this, so you can kind of, and so like when you're right, if I see the palms are facing back, let's see, either there's a couple parts of the brain that affects. So then that tells me, okay, so maybe this is an opportunity, right? So there's like, it's just a little data point where I'm like, okay, go check this and see that if we stimulate that part of the brain, does your function get better? Does your pain start going away?
Okay.
So that's
you can tell that from that initial
yes, from walking.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. So that's just clues, right? It's just data that I'm saying, okay, so I'm noticing like their gait, like when they walk, their feet are wide. Okay. For example, right? Yeah. And so what does a wider base tell me? That they need a wider base for them to balance. Gotcha. Better, right? So like if a 12-month-old starts walking like little baby toddler gait, like their feet are really wide. Yeah. Partially because they're not really coordinated yet, but like a wider base is more stable. And so I'm like, okay, maybe their balance system is maybe a little underactive. And this is why they need to walk this way. Okay. Right. So that's an example. So I watch a gait. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that so now when you watch people walking down the street or whatever, walking into the dojo, you can like see like, how do they walk? Yeah.
I usually watch people walk out of the gym. They crawl out.
They crawl out.
Oh, we're done here. That's pretty fascinating.
So I have them walk. Yeah. Yeah. And then the next thing I do a series of tests. Some of them that look like, right, the cerebellar tests that look a little bit like the DUI tests. And then I do some vision drills, some just assessments of their eyes, because between their vision and then their cerebellum, their coordination, and then their gait, those tell me a lot about really the big drivers of movement and what the state of them is or are. Yeah. Wow. Again, like I said, like, are their eyes doing the same thing? Are they kind of jittery? When like you're doing this pencil push-up, does the object double at some point? Things like that. Yeah. Okay. That's pretty neat. Just listen to that. It was sparking my mind as you're talking about that, saying those things. It's a guy you need to look up. I'm trying to create relationships here. A guy, Quentin Torres, online. I think you guys should do a podcast together. Okay. I mean, just the stuff you're talking about, and he talks about similar things with the muscles, and you both are fascinating what you do. I think you guys can create one big monster. I mean, a perfect monster. No joke. Yeah. Quentin Torres. Quentin Torres. Okay. Got it. It's very well. He may have similar training that I do, but I will definitely look him up. Yeah. There's so much potential in this, and it's not. There are actually like professional athletes across all the the leagues like NHL, NBA, NFL, etc. That have worked with coaches like me. Yeah. But particularly in the States, because if it's going to give you an advantage, like these trainers that work with them, like they have to sign NDAs. Like you can't talk about the fact that you work with me. Oh, wow. I didn't know. I don't want, right. Which is part of why you may not hear about it as much, at least in the States. Yeah. But because there is such, right, it's just getting that last 1-2%, or doing things that are going to help me stay healthier than maybe somebody else. So my contract gets renewed, etc., stuff like that. But in Europe, it's different for whatever, maybe, I'm not sure why, but there are plenty of professional soccer players that will say, oh yeah, this thing, like I credit this for like keeping me in the game for another 5 years, or like this helped me get over injury and pain that nothing else could. And so there are, I think this is maybe why it's just not as widespread, or we don't hear about like people that have enormous audiences that may be using this. That they just don't talk about it.
That makes sense.
But it can be, and even for me, like working with like my main one of my big priorities, I would say probably the bigger priority in some ways, is actually reaching coaches, because when I get to work with a coach who was like, yes, I want to do this, I want you to help me, I want you to help my athletes, that is like where the power is when you really integrate it into how you train.
Okay,
right?
Gotcha.
Whether that's just doing a few minutes of physical prep, whether that's like, oh, I'm having trouble with this move, like what's a neuro-based drill that we can do to help me with this, do this better.
Okay.
Right. And that's and in the end, the reason I get so excited is because, like, at least for gymnasts, it makes things feel easier.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And that for any sport where it's high level, or whatever it is, like, again, like we're not 25 anymore. Like, how can I make my body feel a little more efficient and a little better as I'm doing this thing?
Okay.
Right? Like that's gold.
Yeah,
then I can do it for longer, right? I hurt a little less, or if I start hurting, I have some things that can get me out of that feeling.
I think what you're talking about here is going to be huge. I don't know if it's more mainstream. Do you think it's getting more mainstream what you're doing now? Because
it is, I think so. And I mean, what is mainstream?
Yeah, right. Good point.
Like,
good point.
Yeah. Like, I think when, I don't know what that ultimately means. Like, I worked with, with some Olympians. They're like, I've never heard of this. I've never seen any of this before. And so even at these highest levels of sport, like most people have not heard of it. I think because in order to get the level of training I have, it took me, about 1,500 hours of training, which was a lot.
Oh, wow.
But I don't know. Hopefully that's what I'm trying to do though.
Yeah. Well,
get it out there. Because it
I
can be life-changing and performance-changing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm looking at people and I'm just listening to this and I'm looking at, I think it's going to get more mainstream because I think we're all getting smarter. May not socially, but we're all getting smarter. Where we're starting to understand how we want to be a little bit healthier. We're trying to get healthier. Health and diets are not no longer a fad as they used to be years ago. But now they're part of life. So people are seeking out stuff like this. I think you're going to be huge.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah. Things that I can do myself.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think you're right in the sense that like, my first instinct is to call my doctor and go get a pill for this thing.
Yeah, right.
Yep. Or to go get surgery or get a cortisone shot or whatever it is. Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think
see
we're
that
getting away from
change.
that.
Yeah. That change is happening. And I think it's fantastic because the hardest part is that you have to do stuff.
Right, that's it. I can't sit on the couch and drink a beer and get better.
I can't just lay on the table. I can't just lay on the table or like take this pill.
The magic pill.
For some people, so for some people, like, you know what? I'd rather just like lay on the table and have somebody do this to me, right?
You know what? I would love that if it didn't cost me a ton of it was a leg and an arm or whatever you call it.
Right.
I was watching a documentary. I'm not going to keep you longer, but I was watching this documentary series. You probably have heard of it. Basically it's about, I can't remember, but it's about why are all these old people getting older? I guess living longer.
Okay.
And the main thing is it's a big group out in California somewhere too. They interviewed a whole bunch of these this one I can't even talk. One of these communities for the elderly, and they were just saying they stay active, they do slight yoga, they do these little things, they eat better, and they're averaging 100 years old out there.
Oh my gosh.
It's insane. It's a documentary. You can probably find it something about being old. I guess you can Google it. I don't know. wish I had a better, see, I need a better memory. I need a better memory of all this stuff. But it's on the Discovery Channel. I think it's Discovery Channel, one of those channels. I was actually watching it last week when I was sitting in the dentist's office screaming. I was looking at the screen and watching it. I was like, man, it was great. But you guys, I'm telling you, the stuff you did, you fascinate me. You really do. And I appreciate you taking the time to come on here and share some of this knowledge with a guy who's not that bright. But I will be one day.
My pleasure. You are. You're geniuses. We all have genius in different ways.
That's right. I'm gonna take you on there. You sound like my mother. Tony, you are special. You know. But before we get you out of here, tell everyone how they can find you. I want all your social media, everything. I want people to reach out to you.
Yeah, so I'm most active on Instagram, and it's LevelUp Neuro, Neuro. And while I do post, it's going to be all about gymnastics, but the same drills that I demonstrate for like that you like see the gymnast doing, like anybody can do them.
Gotcha.
So that will just give you an idea of what it looks like. And then my website is levelupneuro.io.
Okay. Gotcha.
And so those are really the two places that you can find me. So I have some, there's you can go a little bit more in depth on, what does it actually mean? What does it look like?
Okay. Perfect.
Yep.
Perfect. You know what? This has been awesome. I'm over here smiling. I love saying I take a lot of notes, but just listening to stuff you're saying is going to stick with me here, and I'm going to do some more deep dives on this, and hopefully we can get you back on a second time here. And I really hope you can reach out to Quentin and you guys.
I will. I wrote down his name. Yep, definitely.
Yeah,
I'll reach out to him.
I think you guys can grow hard together, and it's gonna. You guys will bring this kind of stuff. I don't know. I get excited about that stuff. But anyway,
awesome. I do too.
Yuka, I appreciate you so much, guys. That's been Miss Yuka Sagira. You guys look her up at LevelUp Neuroperformance out in California. Find her. You heard just a tidbit of what she can do for you, and I really believe this is the next wave of health success. So with that, Yuka, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much.
And we'll talk soon. Take care of yourself out there.
Okay.
All right. Bye-bye.
Oh, man.